The Winterbourne Ball was considered the most prestigious event of the London season, and Cassia Gresham had absolutely no business being there. She had positioned herself behind a towering arrangement of hothouse roses, close enough to the refreshment table to appear purposeful, far enough from the dancing to avoid pity invitations. At 24 years old, she had perfected the art of elegant invisibility, smiling when required, speaking when addressed, and otherwise fading into the elaborate wallpaper like a ghost in silk. Her gown was the color of midnight, chosen deliberately because dark fabric concealed alterations better than pastels. She had restructured the bodice twice and replaced the original pearl buttons with one salvaged from her grandmother's mourning dress. To a casual observer, she looked perfectly respectable. To anyone who understood fashion, she looked like what she was, a woman stretched thin by circumstances, maintaining appearances through sheer force of will. The Gresham family had once been prominent, not wealthy by ducal standards, but comfortable, respected, secure. Then her father had trusted the wrong investment partner, signed documents he should have read more carefully, and watched 3 generations of careful prosperity evaporate in a single season. That was 4 years ago. They had been sliding downward ever since, selling paintings, dismissing servants, closing off rooms in their country house because they could not afford to heat them. Her mother's health had declined under the strain. Her younger sister Tanith, now 17, faced the horrifying prospect of a debut season with no dowry and a family name increasingly associated with whispered words like unfortunate and reduced. Cassia had spent those 4 years searching for solutions. She had applied for governess positions, only to be told that ladies of her breeding were unsuitable for service. She had considered companion roles, but those required references from families who wanted nothing to do with scandal by association. She had even, in her most desperate moments, contemplated which of her few remaining suitors she could stomach, marrying purely for survival. The answer had been none of them. The men willing to marry a dowry-less woman with a disgraced family name were invariably the sort who saw such circumstances as license to treat a wife however they pleased. So here she stood, at a ball she had only gained entry to through her mother's decades-old friendship with Lady Ashburn, wearing a 4-year-old gown and pretending that everything was perfectly fine. "That one," a voice said from somewhere behind the roses. Clear, aristocratic, utterly certain. Cassia froze, her glass of lemonade halfway to her lips. "I beg your pardon, Your Grace." A second voice, nervous and eager to please. "The dark-haired woman by the flowers. Who is she?" Cassia's heart began to pound. They were discussing her. She should announce her presence, step around the arrangement and acknowledge them directly. But something in the first voice, that tone of assessment and calculation, kept her motionless. "That is Miss Cassia Gresham, Your Grace. Viscount Gresham's eldest daughter. The family has had some difficulties in recent years. Financial troubles, I understand. She came out several seasons ago but never married. Why not? Various theories. Some say she is too particular. Others claim she values her independence. Personally, I believe she simply never found a suitable match before her circumstances changed." There was a pause. Cassia hardly dared breathe. "Is she desperate?" The bluntness of the question made her nearly choke on her lemonade. She set down the glass with trembling fingers. "I would not say desperate, Your Grace, but she must be aware that her options diminish with each passing year. Her sister comes out next season. Without some reversal of fortune, neither of them will make advantageous matches." "Perfect," the first voice declared with evident satisfaction. "She is exactly what I need." Before Cassia could process this alarming statement, a woman swept around the rose arrangement with the unstoppable force of a winter storm. She was perhaps 60, dressed in silver brocade that probably cost more than the Gresham family's annual household budget. Diamonds glittered at her throat, her ears, her wrists. Her white hair was arranged in an elaborate style that defied both gravity and good sense, and her eyes, sharp as cut glass, assessed Cassia with uncomfortable thoroughness. "Miss Cassia Gresham," the woman announced, not a question. "I am Lucretia Aldridge, Dowager Duchess of Westhaven. I have a proposition for you that will sound entirely mad. I suggest you hear me out before refusing." Cassia blinked at her. Around them, she could see other guests noticing this encounter, heads turning, whispers beginning. "Your Grace," she managed, executing a curtsy despite her shock. "I am honored by your attention, but I cannot imagine what proposition a duchess would have for me." "Can you not?" Lucretia's lips curved into something between a smile and a smirk. "Then let me be direct. Your gloves have been turned at least twice. Your gown, while cleverly altered, is at minimum 3 seasons old. Those garnets at your throat are paste replacements for whatever genuine stones your family has been forced to sell. You are here tonight on borrowed invitation and borrowed pride. And unless something changes dramatically, you will spend the rest of your life watching your family sink further into genteel poverty." The assessment was brutal, accurate, and delivered without malice, which somehow made it worse. "Your Grace, I hardly think I am not finished." Lucretia gestured imperiously toward a small alcove where 2 chairs sat partially screened by potted palms. "Sit with me. What I am about to propose will change your life entirely. You may refuse, of course, but you would be a fool to do so without listening." Every instinct told Cassia to make her excuses and flee. This woman was dangerous in the way that only powerful aristocrats could be. Someone who moved through society, reshaping it according to her whims. But Cassia had spent 4 years being sensible, cautious, and practical. Where had it gotten her? Standing behind roses at a ball she barely belonged at, wearing paste jewelry and praying no one looked too closely. Perhaps it was time to stop being careful. She followed the Dowager Duchess to the alcove. "I have a son," Lucretia began without preamble once they were seated. "Theron Aldridge, Duke of Westhaven. 31 years old, obscenely wealthy, in excellent health, and in possession of one very significant problem. Which is, he refuses to marry, has refused for a decade, despite my introducing him to every suitable woman in England. He finds them all tedious, scheming, or otherwise objectionable." Lucretia's tone suggested she found this both frustrating and faintly amusing. Unfortunately, his late father had rather particular views about family duty. The terms of Theron's inheritance require him to be married by his 32nd birthday, or half the Aldridge estate passes to his cousin Phineas. That seems rather extreme. My husband was an extreme man. He believed marriage would settle Theron, give him purpose beyond his books and his parliamentary reforms. Lucretia's expression carried a shadow that might have been grief, quickly suppressed. He was not wrong, precisely. But Theron has responded to coercion by becoming increasingly stubborn. Cassia was beginning to see where this was going, and it made her stomach clench with something between hope and horror. "Your Grace, surely you are not suggesting—" "Theron's birthday is in 3 weeks, Lucretia interrupted. "He needs to be married. You need money. I am proposing a business arrangement." The words hung between them, stark and impossible. "You want me to marry your son?" "I want you to marry my son for 1 year. Long enough to satisfy the inheritance requirements and allow us to resolve certain legal complications. After the year concludes, you will receive a quiet annulment and a settlement, generous enough to restore your family's finances entirely, pay for your sister's debut, and provide you with an independent income for life." Cassia stared at her. "That is insane." "That is practical. Theron needs a wife who will not bore him to tears, who possesses intelligence enough to hold conversation and dignity enough to represent the family appropriately. I have watched you for several weeks now, Miss Gresham. You meet these criteria admirably. You have been watching me? I am always watching, Lucretia said simply. It is how one survives in society. Now, I do not expect an answer tonight, but I will send my carriage for you tomorrow morning at 10. You will meet Theron. We will discuss terms properly, and you will make your decision with full knowledge of what you are agreeing to. She rose, clearly considering the conversation concluded. Wait, Cassia said, her mind spinning. Your son, does he know about this plan? Lucretia's smile turned enigmatic. He will by morning. And if he refuses? If he would rather lose half his inheritance than marry a stranger? Then you will have lost nothing but a morning. But I know my son, Miss Gresham. Theron is stubborn, proud, occasionally insufferable, but he is not stupid. Once he considers the implications properly, he will see the wisdom in this arrangement. She paused at the edge of the alcove, looking back. The question is whether you will see it as well. 10 o'clock. Do not be late. She swept away, leaving Cassia alone with her racing thoughts and the growing certainty that her life had just changed irrevocably one way or another. The Gresham townhouse had once been elegant. Now it was merely respectable. The furniture slightly shabby, the carpets worn thin in places, the walls marked by faint rectangles where paintings had hung before being sold to pay creditors. Cassia arrived home to find her mother dozing in the drawing room, a book fallen open in her lap. Lady Gresham had been beautiful once, was beautiful still in certain lights. But the past 4 years had carved worry into her face, stolen the color from her cheeks, and left her perpetually exhausted, despite doing almost nothing. Tanith was curled in the window seat, reading one of the novels she devoured constantly, stories of adventure and romance entirely unlike their actual lives. You are home early, her sister observed without looking up. Was the ball dreadful? The ball was fine. Cassia moved to wake their mother gently. Something happened. I need to tell you both, and father too if he is home. He went out. Tanith's voice carried the careful neutrality they had all developed regarding their father's evening activities. Out meant the gambling halls, the desperate pursuit of the one lucky night that would restore everything he had lost. It never came. Then I will tell you and mother now, and him in the morning. Cassia touched her mother's shoulder. Mama, wake up. I have news. Lady Gresham stirred, blinking in confusion before her expression sharpened with worry. Cassia, what is wrong? Has something happened? Nothing is wrong. At least, I do not think it is. Cassia took a deep breath. I have received a rather unusual proposal. The Dowager Duchess of Westhaven wishes me to marry her son. The silence that followed was profound. Marry the Duke of Westhaven, her mother repeated slowly. Theron Aldridge, one of the wealthiest men in England. Yes. Did you meet him tonight? Did he court you secretly? I do not understand. Cassia explained everything. The overheard conversation, Lucretia's proposition, the inheritance deadline, and the offered terms. As she spoke, she watched her mother's expression cycle through disbelief, shock, calculation, and finally something that looked painfully like hope. A contracted marriage, Lady Gresham said when Cassia finished. For 1 year, then an annulment with settlement. Yes, and this settlement would be enough to, she implied it would restore everything. Our debts, Tanith's dowry, an independent income for me, enough to start fresh. Tanith had abandoned her book entirely, staring at Cassia with wide eyes. You would actually do this? Marry a complete stranger? I would marry a man I am about to meet for the first time tomorrow, yes, assuming he agrees, and the terms are acceptable. This is madness, Tanith breathed, but there was no condemnation in her voice, only wonder. Their mother was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice trembled slightly. Cassia, I never wanted this for you. Any of this. You deserve a proper courtship, a love match, a husband who adores you for yourself. Perhaps I do. Cassia knelt beside her mother's chair, taking her thin hands. But that is not the world we live in. In our world, you cannot afford the medicine Dr. Hartley recommended. Tanith faces a debut season with nothing to recommend her but our tarnished name. Father gambles away what little we have left because he cannot face the destruction he caused. This, Mama, this could fix everything. At what cost to you? 1 year. Cassia squeezed her mother's hands. 1 year of marriage to a man who, by all accounts, is neither cruel nor objectionable, merely reluctant. I have survived 4 years of watching our family crumble. I can survive 12 months as a duchess. Lady Gresham's eyes filled with tears. You are so much braver than I ever was. I learned from watching you hold this family together when everything fell apart. Cassia kissed her mother's forehead. I meet the Duke tomorrow morning. I will know more after that. But I wanted you to understand before I go. That night, Cassia lay awake in her small bedroom, staring at the ceiling and trying to imagine what the Duke of Westhaven would be like. Lucretia had called him stubborn, proud, and occasionally insufferable, hardly a ringing endorsement. But she had also mentioned parliamentary reforms, books, intelligence. Perhaps there was more to Theron Aldridge than aristocratic arrogance. Perhaps she was about to make the most foolish decision of her life. Either way, by this time tomorrow, everything would be different. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. At 10 o'clock precisely, a carriage bearing the Westhaven crest arrived at their door. Cassia took one last look at her family, her mother's anxious face, Tanith's encouraging smile, and stepped into the unknown. Westhaven House dominated its corner of Mayfair like a stone fortress, all imposing columns and towering windows that seemed designed to remind visitors exactly how insignificant they were. Cassia had passed it countless times, but never imagined she would enter its doors, certainly not as a prospective bride. The Dowager Duchess met her in the entrance hall, dressed today in deep plum velvet that made her silver hair gleam. Good. You're punctual. Theron despises lateness. Lucretia took her arm with proprietary familiarity. He knows you are coming, though I cannot say he received the news gracefully. There may have been shouting, possibly a thrown book. That is reassuring, Cassia said faintly. Oh, he has calmed down, mostly. Now remember, he will bluster and protest. Let him. Theron works through his temper verbally. Once he has exhausted his objections, he becomes quite reasonable. And if he remains unreasonable, he will not. I know my son. Lucretia paused outside a set of mahogany doors. He is in the library. Do try not to be intimidated. Dukes are merely men with better tailoring. She pushed open the doors, and Cassia got her first look at Theron Aldridge. He stood by the fireplace, one arm resting on the mantel, radiating the kind of barely contained fury that made the air itself feel charged. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his temples, and a jaw that could have been carved from the same stone as his house. His eyes were the gray-green of storm clouds, and currently they were fixed on Cassia, with an intensity that made her breath catch. He was, she realized with dismay, devastatingly handsome. That was going to make everything considerably more complicated. So, he said, his voice clipped and cold. You are my mother's latest scheme. Cassia straightened her spine. She had not survived 4 years of social purgatory to be cowed by a scowling duke, however attractive. And you are the reluctant bridegroom. We are both victims of circumstance, Your Grace. I suggest we discuss the matter like civilized adults, rather than exchanging accusations." His eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Surprise, perhaps, possibly the faintest hint of respect. "Direct," he observed. "My mother said you had backbone. I assumed she was exaggerating." "Your mother seems to have said quite a lot about me. I, meanwhile, know almost nothing about you, beyond your unwillingness to marry, and your apparently imminent loss of half your fortune. My fortune is not your concern. It is, if I am to help you keep it." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Theron pushed away from the fireplace, moving toward her with deliberate slowness. "Let me be clear, Miss Gresham. I did not ask for this arrangement. I do not want a wife, temporary or otherwise. If my father had not written his prejudices into legal documentation, we would not be having this conversation. And yet we are having it." Cassia refused to step back, though he now stood close enough that she could see the individual threads of silver in his cravat. "Because your alternative is losing half your estate to a cousin you apparently despise, while my alternative is watching my family descend further into poverty. Neither of us chose these circumstances, but we both have the opportunity to make the best of them." "The best of them," he repeated flatly. "You make marriage to a stranger sound like a business investment. Is it not? Your mother proposed a contract, terms and conditions, compensation upon completion. That is business, Your Grace, however much we dress it in ceremony." He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It was a harsh sound, more surprise than humor, but it transformed his face entirely, making him look younger, almost approachable. "You are not at all what I expected," he admitted. "What did you expect? Someone weeping with gratitude at the honor of becoming a duchess. Someone scheming to trap me into permanence. Someone, like every other woman my mother has paraded before me for the last decade." "I have no interest in trapping you into anything," Cassia said evenly. "I want to save my family. You want to preserve your inheritance. These goals align. 1 year from now, we part ways, both having achieved our objectives. There need be no scheming involved." Theron studied her with new interest, as if seeing her properly for the first time. "You truly believe it can be that simple?" "I believe it can be that straightforward, yes. Whether it will be simple remains to be seen." "Theron, stop looming over the girl and sit down," Lucretia interjected, settling herself onto a settee. "We have terms to discuss." The next hour was among the strangest of Cassia's life. They negotiated her future like a trade agreement, discussing timelines, living arrangements, public appearances, and financial considerations with clinical precision. She would move into West Haven House immediately, occupying the Duchess's apartments with Lucretia as chaperone. The wedding would take place in 1 week, private ceremony, and limited witnesses. After the marriage, she would be expected to fulfill social obligations as his Duchess, attending events, hosting dinners, presenting a united front. "And at the end of the year?" Cassia asked. "A quiet annulment," Lucretia answered, "arranged through ecclesiastical courts. We will cite irreconcilable differences, incompatibility, something dignified. You will receive your settlement and your freedom." "One question remains," Theron said. He had been largely silent during the negotiations, watching Cassia with that unsettling intensity. "Why should I trust you to honor these terms? What prevents you from changing your mind once you have access to the Aldridge wealth and deciding you prefer to remain Duchess permanently?" It was a fair question, however insulting. "Because I have no interest in remaining where I am not wanted," Cassia replied. "I am accepting this arrangement because my family needs salvation, not because I wish to climb socially. I have no designs on your fortune, your title, or your person, Your Grace. Once the year concludes, and my family is secure, I intend to live quietly on my settlement and trouble you never again." Such flattering eagerness to be rid of me. You have made your reluctance abundantly clear. I see no point in pretending otherwise. Their eyes locked, something crackling in the air between them. Challenge, perhaps. Or the beginning of a respect neither had expected. Very well, Theron said finally. We have an agreement. I will marry you next week, maintain the fiction of a genuine union for 1 year, and then release you with the promised compensation. He paused, his gaze sharpening. But understand this, Miss Gresham. I value honesty above all else. If at any point you deceive me, scheme behind my back, or prove yourself untrustworthy, this arrangement ends immediately and unfavorably for you. Then we understand each other perfectly. I have the same expectations of you. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Theron extended his hand, an oddly formal gesture for a future husband and wife. Partners in necessity, then. Cassia took his hand. His grip was warm, firm, and sent an unexpected jolt of awareness through her entire body. Partners in necessity. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, as if he had felt something too. Then he released her hand and stepped back, the moment broken. Welcome to West Haven House, Miss Gresham. I do hope you know what you are getting yourself into. Looking at him, at the challenge in his eyes, and the reluctant respect in his voice, and the dangerous attraction she absolutely could not afford to acknowledge, Cassia suspected she had no idea whatsoever, but it was too late to turn back now. Moving into West Haven House felt like stepping into another universe entirely. Cassia arrived 3 days after their initial meeting, her modest trunk looking almost comically inadequate beside the grandeur of the entrance hall. A footman had collected her belongings with an expression of carefully concealed judgment, and the housekeeper, Mrs. Haddock, had escorted her through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly. The Duchess's apartments, miss, Mrs. Haddock announced, opening a set of doors to reveal rooms that stole Cassia's breath entirely. The sitting room was decorated in shades of ivory and pale gold, with furniture that managed to be both elegant and inviting. Tall windows overlooked a private garden where winter roses somehow still bloomed. Through an archway, she glimpsed a bedroom dominated by a canopied bed, draped in silk the color of champagne. It was beautiful. It was also approximately 4 times the size of the entire upper floor of the Gresham townhouse. The Dowager Duchess occupies the adjoining suite, Mrs. Haddock continued, gesturing toward a connecting door. His Grace's apartments are in the east wing. Breakfast is served in the morning room at 8. Luncheon is informal, as His Grace is often occupied with parliamentary matters. Dinner is at 7. Formal dress required. Thank you, Mrs. Haddock. Cassia tried to sound confident rather than overwhelmed. I am certain I will manage. The housekeeper's expression suggested doubt, but was too professional to voice it. If you require anything, miss, you need only ring. After she departed, Cassia stood in the center of her new sitting room and allowed herself one moment of pure terror. In 4 days, she would marry the Duke of Westhaven. She would become a duchess, responsible for managing a household larger than any she had ever seen, expected to navigate social waters that had nearly drowned her even before her family's disgrace. What had she agreed to? A knock at the connecting door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Lucretia swept in without waiting for invitation, dressed in mourning attire that probably cost more than Cassia's entire wardrobe. Settling in. Excellent. We have much to discuss before the wedding. The Dowager Duchess settled into a chair with the air of someone who intended to stay. First, wardrobe. What you are currently wearing is adequate for a Viscount's daughter of reduced circumstances. It will not do for the Duchess of Westhaven. I cannot afford. You are not paying. Consider it an investment in the arrangement's success. Lucretia waved away the objection. Madame Fontaine will arrive this afternoon for measurements. I have already selected appropriate fabrics. You will have a wedding gown and at minimum 6 evening dresses, completed before the ceremony. That is incredibly generous, Your Grace. That is incredibly practical. You cannot be seen publicly in worn silk and paste jewelry. People would talk. Lucretia's eyes sharpened. Speaking of which, we need to establish your history with Theron. The story of how you met, how the courtship developed, why the engagement was kept private until now. They spent the next hour constructing an elaborate fiction. Cassia and Theron had supposedly met at Lady Ashburn's garden party 6 months ago, discovered shared intellectual interests, and conducted a quiet courtship away from society's scrutiny. The hasty wedding was attributed to Theron's impatience with lengthy engagements and Cassia's desire for privacy, given her family's circumstances. Will anyone believe this? Cassia asked skeptically. They will believe it because they want to believe it. Society loves a romantic secret more than it loves scandal. Lucretia stood, clearly considering the session complete. Now, Theron has requested dinner with you this evening, just the two of you. He wishes to establish ground rules before the wedding. Ground rules. My son approaches most things like negotiations. Indulge him. You may find his directness refreshing once you adjust. That evening, Cassia descended to the dining room, wearing the best of her limited options, a deep burgundy gown that at least had the virtue of being only 2 seasons old. Theron was already present, standing by the window with a glass of wine, staring out at the darkening garden. He turned when she entered, and his gaze swept over her with undisguised interest before he schooled his features back to neutrality. Miss Gresham, you look well. Thank you, Your Grace. Theron. He moved to hold her chair, the gesture automatic rather than warm. If we are to convince anyone this marriage is genuine, you should probably use my given name. Theron, then. The name felt strange on her tongue, too intimate for someone she barely knew. And you must call me Cassia. Cassia. He took his seat across from her, and the footman began serving. My mother informs me you spent the afternoon being fitted for gowns and constructing romantic fiction about our courtship. Your mother is efficient. My mother is terrifying. There is a distinction. But there was reluctant affection in his voice. She also tells me you handled the situation admirably. Most women would have been overwhelmed by her demands. I have spent 4 years handling overwhelming situations. Your mother, formidable as she is, does not frighten me. No? He raised an eyebrow. What does frighten you? The question caught her off guard with its directness. Failure, she admitted after a moment. Watching my family suffer when I might have prevented it. Making choices I cannot undo. And yet you agreed to marry a stranger. Some choices require accepting fear rather than avoiding it. He studied her across the candlelit table, his expression thoughtful. You continue to surprise me, Cassia. I had prepared myself for simpering gratitude or calculated manipulation. Instead, I find honest pragmatism. Is that preferable? Infinitely. He set down his wineglass. Very well. Let us establish our terms clearly. This marriage will be legally binding but functionally limited. We will share a household, but not a life. I have my work, my interests, and my private concerns. You will have yours. We will appear together publicly when required, and maintain separate existences otherwise. That sounds rather lonely. It sounds sensible. Romantic entanglement would only complicate an already complicated arrangement. Agreed. Cassia met his eyes steadily. Though I should point out that complete strangers rarely convince society of genuine affection. We will need to spend some time together, at minimum enough to know basic facts about each other. Such as your favorite foods, your daily habits, whether you prefer mornings or evenings. The small details that couples naturally accumulate. Very well. Theron leaned back, a trace of amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. I take my coffee black, my whiskey neat. I rise early to ride, regardless of weather. I work in my study most afternoons and read in the library most evenings. I despise social small talk, political dishonesty, and being interrupted while thinking. Your turn. I prefer tea to coffee, mornings to evenings. I read voraciously, philosophy and history mostly. I have no particular talents beyond adequate watercolors and better than expected mathematics. I value honesty, despise pretension, and become irritable when hungry. Noted. I will ensure you are always well fed. It was almost a joke. Cassia found herself smiling despite the strangeness of the situation. How considerate, Your Grace. Theron. She tested the name again. It came easier this time. We will survive this year, I think. Survive, yes. His eyes held hers, and she noticed the way the candlelight caught the green flecks in their gray depths. The question is whether we will survive it intact. Before she could ask what he meant, the next course arrived, and the moment passed. But his words lingered in her mind, long after dinner concluded, a warning she could not quite interpret. The wedding was a small affair, held in the West Haven House Chapel, with only family and essential witnesses present. Cassia wore ivory silk that Madame Fontaine had somehow completed in 4 days, and carried roses from the garden she could see from her window. Theron looked like something from a painting, tall and solemn in dark formal attire, his expression revealing nothing as she walked toward him. When they exchanged vows, his voice was steady, impersonal, reciting words that should have meant everything, and instead felt like reading from a script. The ring he slid onto her finger was a family heirloom, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds that had belonged to his grandmother. It felt heavy, significant, a weight of history she had not earned. I now pronounce you man and wife. The kiss was brief, perfunctory, the barest brush of his lips against hers. Yet even that minimal contact sent an unexpected current through her, a spark of awareness she quickly suppressed. Business arrangement, she reminded herself. Nothing more. The wedding breakfast afterward was similarly restrained. Cassia's parents attended, her mother tearful with complicated emotions, her father subdued and avoiding Theron's eyes. Tanith bubbled with barely contained excitement, already dreaming of her improved prospects. And then it was over. The guests departed, the servants cleared the remnants, and Cassia found herself standing in her sitting room as the Duchess of Westhaven, uncertain what to do next. A knock at her door made her turn. Theron stood in the doorway, still in his wedding clothes, his expression carefully neutral. "The Ashworth ball is tomorrow evening," he said without preamble. "Our first public appearance as a married couple. Society will be watching closely." I assumed as much. You will need to be prepared. Lady Ashworth is one of the most influential hostesses in London. Her opinion shapes receptions for the entire season. Then we should ensure her opinion is favorable. He studied her for a moment. "You are not nervous?" "I'm terrified," Cassia admitted. "But I have learned that terror and capability are not mutually exclusive." His expression eased, softening almost imperceptibly. "No, I suppose they are not." He paused, seeming to debate something internally. "I will call for you at 8. We should arrive neither too early nor too late. 8 o'clock. I will be ready." He nodded once and withdrew. Cassia released a breath she had not realized she was holding. The Ashworth ball was everything Cassia had feared and nothing she had expected. The ballroom blazed with hundreds of candles, their light reflecting off crystal chandeliers and diamond-draped guests. The cream of London society had gathered, and every single one of them turned to observe when the Duke and new Duchess of Westhaven were announced. Cassia felt their scrutiny like physical pressure. Whispers rose like wind through autumn leaves, carrying fragments she could not quite hear, but could easily imagine. Theron's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. "Ignore them," he murmured, pitched for her ears alone. "They are curious, nothing more. Give them something to admire rather than dissect." Easy for you to say. You have been ignoring society your entire life. True. Was that a hint of amusement in his voice? But you have survived years of diminished circumstances with your dignity intact. This is merely a different arena. Before she could respond, Lady Ashworth descended upon them, a formidable woman in violet silk whose smile revealed nothing of her thoughts. "Your Grace, what a pleasure. And the new Duchess, at last we meet properly. I must confess, your engagement took us all quite by surprise." "The best things often do," Theron replied smoothly. His hand remained on Cassia's, warm and steadying. "Cassia and I preferred to know our own minds before inviting public commentary. How refreshingly private of you." Lady Ashworth's eyes assessed Cassia with surgical precision. "Tell me, Your Grace, how do you find married life thus far?" "Illuminating," Cassia managed. "I am learning a great deal about the Aldridge household." "And the Aldridge Duke?" "Him most of all." Lady Ashworth's smile warmed by several degrees. "Wit as well as beauty. You have chosen well, Westhaven." "I am aware." The compliment, delivered with such casual certainty, caught Cassia off guard. She glanced at Theron, but his expression remained politely neutral, revealing nothing. The evening continued in similar fashion. They circulated through the gathering, speaking with lords and ladies, navigating conversations laden with curiosity and subtle interrogation. Through it all, Theron remained attentive, his hand finding her elbow to guide her, his head inclining toward her during discussions, his focus returning to her again and again. To outside observers, they must have looked like a couple genuinely fascinated by each other. The most challenging moment came when Lady Pemberton, a notorious gossip, cornered them near the refreshment table. "Tell me truly, Your Grace, were you not surprised by the match? The Greshams, while respectable, have had such difficulties lately. Some might say the connection is unequal." Cassia felt her cheeks heat with embarrassment, but before she could respond, Theron spoke. "I find the concept of equality in marriage rather outdated, Lady Pemberton. What matters is compatibility of mind and character. In those respects, Cassia exceeds any woman I have ever encountered." He looked at her directly as he said it, something fierce in his expression. "I consider myself fortunate that she accepted me." The declaration silenced Lady Pemberton entirely. It also sent a cascade of warmth through Cassia's chest that she firmly attributed to relief rather than anything more complicated. Later, as the orchestra struck up a waltz, Theron extended his hand. "We should dance. It is expected." "You despise dancing." "I despise dancing with tedious partners. You, however, might prove tolerable." Such flattery. But she took his hand, and they moved onto the floor together. His arm encircled her waist, drawing her closer than strictly necessary, and they began to move. He was an excellent dancer, which somehow did not surprise her. What surprised her was how natural it felt, following his lead, matching his rhythm, moving together as if they had done this 100 times before. "You are full of contradictions," she observed quietly. "You claim to hate social obligation, yet you navigate it flawlessly. You insisted on emotional distance, yet you defended me to Lady Pemberton with considerable passion. Lady Pemberton insulted my wife. I responded appropriately. Your temporary wife." His eyes met hers, gray-green and suddenly intense. "For the duration of this year, you are my wife in truth. I will not have anyone question your worthiness or my judgment in choosing you. Even though you did not choose me, your mother did." I chose to agree. His hand tightened slightly at her waist. That was my decision, Cassia. Do not diminish it. The music swelled around them, and for a moment, the crowded ballroom seemed to fade. There was only the two of them, moving together, something crackling in the air between them that Cassia could not name and dared not examine. When the dance ended, they stood facing each other, both slightly breathless with more than exertion. "I believe that went well," Theron said finally, his voice oddly rough. "Yes." Cassia stepped back, needing distance. "I believe it did." That night, as she lay in her elaborate bed, in her elaborate room, in her elaborate new life, Cassia stared at the canopy above her and tried to sort through the evening's revelations. Theron had defended her, had danced with her, had looked at her as though she mattered beyond the terms of their contract. It meant nothing, she told herself firmly. They were performing roles, nothing more. But her racing pulse told a different story entirely. The weeks following the Ashworth ball settled into a rhythm that Cassia had not anticipated. They had established rules, boundaries, and separate lives occupying the same magnificent space. But somehow, those boundaries kept blurring. Their separate lives kept intersecting, until Cassia found herself uncertain where the performance ended and reality began. It started with small things. Theron began taking his morning coffee in the breakfast room at precisely the time Cassia arrived for tea, though he claimed it was merely coincidence. She found books appearing on the table beside her favorite library chair, volumes she had mentioned wanting to read during passing conversations. He remembered that she disliked parsnips and ensured they never appeared on their dinner menus. "You did not have to do that," she said one evening, 3 weeks into their marriage, after discovering he had instructed the kitchen to always have fresh lemons available for her tea. "It was not difficult." "That is not the point." He looked up from his correspondence, curiosity replacing his usual reserve. "What is the point, then?" "The point is that you notice small things, preferences I barely mentioned. You notice, and you act accordingly. Is that objectionable?" "It is confusing." Cassia set down her teacup with more force than intended. "We agreed to functional partnership, not whatever this is. I was not aware that consideration for one's wife constituted betrayal of our arrangement." "It does not. It simply makes things complicated. Life is complicated." He returned to his letters. "I prefer to make my circumstances as comfortable as possible. Your comfort contributes to mine. The logic is sound." But logic did not explain the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not watching. Did not explain why he had begun spending more evenings in the library, reading in the chair adjacent to hers, rather than in his private study. Did not explain the warmth that spread through her chest whenever she heard his footsteps approaching. Lucretia, naturally, noticed everything. "You have stopped treating each other like wary strangers," she observed during one of their afternoon tea sessions. "It is rather remarkable progress for 6 weeks. We are simply adjusting to shared circumstances." "Is that what you are calling it?" The Dowager Duchess smiled knowingly. "I've been watching my son for 31 years, Cassia. I have never seen him rearrange his entire schedule to be present for meals with someone. I have never seen him discuss parliamentary reform over breakfast or debate philosophical questions over dinner. He is interested in you. He's interested in maintaining a convincing fiction." "If you say so, dear." Cassia wanted to argue further, but found she could not. Because the truth was, she was interested too. More than interested. Somewhere between their morning debates and evening silences, between defending each other at social gatherings and exchanging small kindnesses, she had developed feelings for Theron Aldridge that had no place in a contractual arrangement. She found herself watching him during dinner, noting the way firelight played across his features, the rare smile that transformed his stern face into something almost boyish. She listened for his footsteps in the corridor, felt her pulse quicken when he entered a room. At night, she lay awake, remembering the pressure of his hand at her waist, the intensity in his eyes, when he had called her his wife without qualification. This was dangerous. She knew it was dangerous, but knowing did nothing to prevent it. 6 weeks into the marriage, they attended the Whitmore Music Hall together. It was a smaller gathering than the Ashworth Ball, more intimate, with guests arranged in close proximity for the performance. They sat beside each other on a small settee, pressed together by the confined space. Throughout the music, Cassia was acutely aware of Theron's warmth against her side, the brush of his sleeve against hers, the scent of him, cedar and something darker, something distinctly his. During a particularly moving sonata, his hand found hers in the dim light. It might have been accidental, a casual gesture without meaning, but his fingers interlaced with hers and stayed there, held gently but deliberately until the music concluded. Neither of them acknowledged it afterward, but something fundamental had transformed between them, some final barrier beginning to crumble. That night, Theron walked her to her rooms as had become their custom. They stood in her doorway, the corridor silent around them, and he looked at her with an expression she could not interpret. "Cassia," he said quietly, "I find myself in an unexpected position, which is, I am beginning to forget that this arrangement has an expiration." Her heart stuttered. "Theron, I know." He raised a hand, stopping whatever she might have said. "I know we agreed to boundaries. I know this complicates everything, but I cannot continue pretending that you are simply a contractual obligation when you have become considerably more." "What are you saying?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the conflict in his eyes, the battle between caution and something far more reckless. "I am saying that I think of you constantly, that I have restructured my entire existence around moments with you, that when we return from social engagements, the only thing I want is to continue our conversation, to hear your thoughts, to simply be in your presence." His voice dropped. "I am saying that I no longer wish this to be temporary." Cassia could not breathe. "We agreed. Agreements can be renegotiated. This is not a parliamentary bill, Theron. This is our lives. Precisely why it matters." He raised a hand, not quite touching her face, hovering millimeters away. "Tell me you feel nothing. Tell me these weeks have meant nothing to you. If you can say that honestly, I will respect our original terms and never raise this subject again." She should say it. For both their sakes, she should tell him that she felt nothing, that this was still business, that her heart remained safely uninvolved. But Cassia had promised him honesty above all else. "I cannot say that," she whispered, "because it would be a lie." His eyes blazed with triumph and relief and desperate wanting all at once. His hand finally made contact, cupping her cheek with a tenderness that made her ache. "Then perhaps," he murmured, "we should stop pretending for entirely." He kissed her, not the perfunctory brush of their wedding ceremony, but something real and hungry and devastatingly thorough. Cassia's fingers curled into his lapels, pulling him closer, and when they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, she saw her own tumultuous emotions reflected in his face. "Stay," she heard herself say. "Tonight. Stay with me." He searched her expression, looking for doubt or hesitation. Finding none, he nodded once and followed her through the door. What happened next was inevitable. Perhaps had been inevitable since the moment she took his hand in his mother's drawing room. They came together with an urgency that surprised them both, tenderness and passion intertwined. Two people who had spent weeks denying what now proved undeniable. Afterward, lying tangled in her elaborate duchess's bed, Theron traced patterns on her bare shoulder, while Cassia tried to process what they had just done. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. "None." She turned her head to look at him. "Though this does rather complicate matters." Matters were already complicated, His lips curved. Now they are simply complicated in a more interesting direction. What happens now? Now we stop pretending this is temporary. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Now we build something real. It sounded wonderful. It sounded terrifying. It sounded exactly like what Cassia wanted, even as a small voice in her mind warned that happiness this unexpected rarely came without cost. She silenced that voice and let herself simply feel warm and wanted and hopeful for the first time in years. She had no way of knowing that in several weeks she would overhear 5 words that would shatter everything. 3 weeks after the night everything changed, Cassia woke to violent nausea. She barely made it to the wash basin before losing the contents of her stomach, her body convulsing with waves of sickness that left her trembling and weak. When it finally passed, she sat on the cold floor of her dressing room, her mind racing through possibilities she had been deliberately avoiding. Her courses were late, nearly 4 weeks late, which she had attributed to stress, to the upheaval of her new life, to anything other than the obvious explanation. But combined with the nausea, the exhaustion that had plagued her recently, the strange sensitivity to certain foods, the obvious explanation became impossible to ignore. She was pregnant. Cassia pressed her hands to her still flat stomach, terror and wonder warring within her. A child. Theron's child, conceived during those weeks of growing intimacy, of boundaries dissolving, of 2 people falling into something neither had planned. This changed everything. Their arrangement had been for 1 year. Even with the shift in their relationship, even with Theron's declaration that he wanted this to be real, they had not discussed permanence, had not discussed children, had not discussed what happened when temporary became forever. A baby made temporary impossible. The morning passed in a daze as Cassia went through motions of her daily routine, while her mind churned with implications. Should she tell Theron immediately? Wait until she was certain? See a physician first to confirm what she already knew in her bones. And underneath all the practical questions lurked a deeper fear. What if he didn't want this? What if a child was too much, too permanent, too real? What if the man who had spent a decade avoiding marriage now found himself trapped in fatherhood he had never chosen? She could not bear his resentment, could not bear watching obligation replace affection, duty replace desire. If he stayed with her only because of the child, it would poison everything they had built. By evening, her anxiety had manifested physically. She picked at her dinner, unable to eat, and Theron noticed immediately. "You are unwell," he said, setting down his fork. "You have been pale all day. Should I send for Dr. Hartley?" "I'm fine. Simply tired." "You are lying." He rose from his chair and moved to kneel beside hers, a gesture so unexpected that it stole her breath. "Cassia, what is wrong? You have been distant since this morning. Have I done something to upset you?" "No, you have done nothing wrong." "Then what?" His hand covered hers, warm and concerned. "Tell me. Whatever it is, we will address it together." Together. The word broke something inside her. "I think I am pregnant," she whispered. The silence that followed stretched unbearably. Cassia could not bring herself to look at his face, terrified of what she might see there. Horror, resignation, the careful neutrality of a man calculating how this affected his plans. "Pregnant," he repeated finally. "You think, or you know?" "I have not seen a physician, but the signs are unmistakable. My courses are nearly a month late. I've been ill every morning this week. Her voice broke. "I'm sorry. I know this was not part of our arrangement. I know you never wanted—" "Stop." His fingers tightened on hers. "Look at me, Cassia." She forced herself to meet his eyes, and found, to her shock, not horror or resignation, but something that looked remarkably like wonder. "You are carrying my child," he said slowly, as if testing the words. "Our child." "Yes. And you thought I would be angry about this? I thought you might feel trapped, obligated. You spent 10 years avoiding exactly this kind of permanent entanglement. I spent 10 years avoiding marriage to women I did not love." He reached up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away tears she had not realized were falling. "That is not our situation. That has not been our situation for some time. But a child is unexpected, yes, sooner than I might have planned, certainly." His expression melted into tenderness, but not unwelcome. Never unwelcome. Not when the child is yours. "Truly? Cassia." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I told you weeks ago that I wanted this to be real. Did you think I was speaking of some limited, temporary reality? I meant permanence. I meant building a life together, a family. You never mentioned children. Because I did not wish to pressure you. Because I wanted you to choose this life freely, not feel bound by expectations." He pulled back slightly, searching her face. "Do you want this child?" "Yes." The answer came immediately, from somewhere deeper than thought. "I want this child. I want our child. I simply feared that I would reject you." His jaw set with determination. "After everything we have shared, you still expected me to prove false." "Not false. Simply human. It is not unreasonable to fear that unexpected pregnancy might alter feelings." "My feelings were altered the moment I met you," he said quietly. "Everything since has been merely accepting the inevitable. A child does not change that. A child simply gives us another reason to build something lasting." Relief flooded through her, so intense it left her dizzy. Or perhaps that was the pregnancy. She laughed through her tears, the sound slightly hysterical. "I have been terrified all day," she admitted, imagining every possible negative reaction. And instead, you received enthusiasm, tempered only by concern for your well-being. He helped her to her feet, his hands gentle. "We should send for Dr. Hartley tomorrow, ensure that you and the child are healthy. And we should tell my mother, though I suspect she will be insufferably pleased with herself. She did orchestrate everything. Do not remind me." But he was smiling, genuinely smiling, in a way she had rarely seen. "Come, you should rest. Growing a future duke or duchess is apparently exhausting work." That night, he held her in her bed, her back pressed against his chest, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. Cassia allowed herself to believe, for the first time, that everything might actually work out. She had no way of knowing that in 3 weeks, 5 words would destroy that belief entirely. Dr. Hartley confirmed the pregnancy and estimated she was approximately 8 weeks along. He pronounced her healthy, prescribed rest, and proper nutrition, and departed with promises to return monthly to monitor her progress. Cassia had never felt more simultaneously terrified and hopeful. Theron had become almost unbearably attentive, adjusting her schedule to ensure she rested properly, ordering the kitchen to prepare whatever food she could tolerate, hovering whenever she appeared even slightly pale. It should have been suffocating. Instead, it made her feel cherished in ways she had never experienced. They had not yet made a public announcement, agreeing to wait until she was further along. But within the household, the news had spread, and Cassia found herself the recipient of congratulations from servants she barely knew, all of them seeming genuinely pleased at the prospect of a West Haven heir. "You have won them over," Lucretia observed during one of their afternoon tea sessions. "That is no small accomplishment. The staff has served this family for generations. They do not offer loyalty lightly. I have done nothing to earn it. You have made Theron happy. That is enough." The Dowager Duchess paused, her sharp features softening. "You have made him happier than I have ever seen him, Cassia. Happier than I dared hope when I orchestrated this scheme." You manipulated both of us into this marriage. I gave you both an opportunity. What you have built from it is entirely your own achievement." She patted Cassia's hand. "I am proud to call you my daughter. Truly." It was the first time Lucretia had said anything so directly sentimental. Cassia found herself unexpectedly moved. The unraveling began 3 weeks later. Cassia had spent the morning in her sitting room, attempting to write letters to her family about the pregnancy. Finding the right words proved difficult. How did one explain that a marriage of convenience had somehow become a love match? That the grandchild they would soon have was both unexpected and desperately wanted. She gave up after her third attempt and decided to seek Theron in his study. Perhaps together they could compose something appropriate. The corridor leading to his study was quiet, the afternoon light filtering through tall windows. Then voices reached her ears, raised in anger. Theron's voice, unmistakably furious, and another male voice she did not immediately recognize. Cassia paused, uncertain whether to interrupt. She had never heard Theron sound so enraged, not even during their initial confrontation. The words were muffled by the heavy oak door, but the tone was unmistakable. Drawing closer, intending to knock, she realized the door stood slightly ajar. Through the gap, she could see Theron standing behind his desk, his face flushed with rage, confronting a man she now recognized as his cousin Phineas Aldridge, who stood to inherit half the estate if the marriage failed. Phineas, whose claim Theron's marriage had neutralized. "You cannot be serious," Theron was saying, his voice cold with fury. "You come into my house and dare to suggest—" "I am simply pointing out what everyone already suspects," Phineas replied, his tone oily with false concern. "The timing is too convenient. A hasty marriage to an impoverished woman, and now a pregnancy within months. Society is already whispering about fortune hunters and trapped dukes. Get out. Face the truth, cousin. She used your mother's scheme to her advantage. A year was never going to be enough for her, not when permanent access to the Aldridge fortune was possible. I said get out. Not until you acknowledge what is obvious to everyone except you." Phineas leaned forward. "She trapped you into this. Everyone knows it." And then Theron spoke. 5 words that shattered Cassia's entire world. "She trapped me into this." Cassia heard nothing after that. The context, the fury, the denial that surely followed, all of it dissolved into white noise. She heard only those 5 words in Theron's voice, confirming every fear she had ever harbored, every doubt she had tried to suppress. She trapped me into this. The corridor seemed to spin around her. Pressing a hand to the wall, she fought the urge to be sick, and then she ran. Down the corridor, up the stairs, into her rooms, where she slammed the door and pressed her back against it, gasping for breath. It had all been a lie. Every tender word, every gentle touch, every promise of wanting this to be real. All of it, a performance. He had never stopped seeing her as his mother's scheme, a manipulation he had been forced to accept. And now, with the pregnancy, he felt truly trapped, bound to her permanently by a child he had never wanted. She trapped me into this. The words echoed in her mind, each repetition cutting deeper. She had been such a fool, had believed that someone like Theron Aldridge could genuinely love someone like her, had allowed herself to hope when she should have known better. Moving through the room in a daze, Cassia pulled out the small traveling case she had brought from her family's home. Her original belongings, the few items that were truly hers. With trembling hands, she began to pack. She would leave, tonight if possible. Return to her family, explain that the arrangement had ended prematurely. They would have to survive somehow, would have to find another solution, because she could not stay here. Could not spend another moment in a house where she was merely tolerated, where her presence was resented, where her child would be viewed as evidence of manipulation rather than love. A knock at her door made her freeze. "Cassia," Theron's voice concerned. The servant said you came upstairs rather suddenly. Are you unwell? She did not answer. Could not trust her voice. Cassia, I am coming in. The door opened before she could stop it, and Theron entered to find her standing over a half-packed traveling case, her face streaked with tears she had not managed to suppress after all. His expression cycled from concern to confusion to alarm in rapid succession. What is happening? Why are you packing? Where are you going? Away. Her voice came out raw, broken. I am leaving, Your Grace. Our arrangement is concluded. What are you talking about? We have no arrangement anymore. We have a marriage. A real one. Do we? She laughed bitterly. That is not what I heard you telling your cousin. His face went pale. You heard. I heard everything I needed to hear. She turned away from him, unable to bear the sight of his face. 5 words, Theron. That was all it took to reveal the truth of what I am to you. Cassia, whatever you think you heard, she trapped me into this. She repeated his words back to him, each one poison on her tongue. Your exact words. I heard them clearly enough. You heard them without context. He moved toward her, but she stepped back, putting the bed between them. Cassia, listen to me. Phineas came here spewing accusations, claiming that you deliberately engineered the pregnancy to secure your position. I was repeating his words back to him in disgust before telling him exactly how wrong he was. How convenient. It is the truth. Is it? Or is that simply the explanation that preserves our arrangement until you no longer need me? She pressed her hands to her stomach, protective even now. I will not raise my child in a house where they are viewed as evidence of manipulation. I will not spend years watching you resent us both. I do not resent you. I love you. Then why did you say those words? I did not say them as my own belief. I was quoting Phineas, throwing his accusation back in his face. Theron ran his hands through his hair in obvious frustration. If you had heard the full conversation, you would have heard me telling him that marrying you was the best decision I have ever made. That this child is wanted and loved. That if he ever spoke ill of you or our family again, I would destroy him socially and financially. Cassia wanted desperately to believe him, but the wounds were too fresh, the fear too deeply embedded. I cannot trust this, she whispered. I cannot trust any of it. How do I know you are not simply saying what I need to hear to maintain the fiction? Because I have never lied to you. Not once. He stepped around the bed, slowly, carefully, as if approaching a frightened animal. I was furious with my mother when she orchestrated this marriage. I was resistant and resentful and determined to maintain distance. But you, Cassia, you made that impossible. Your intelligence, your dignity, your strength, everything about you made it impossible to remain indifferent. Theron, I love you. He reached her now, his hands cupping her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Not because of any arrangement, not because of convenience or obligation or inheritance requirements. I love you because you challenge me and surprise me and make me want to be better than I am. And this child, our child, is not a trap. Our child is a gift I never knew I wanted until you gave it to me. She searched his face, looking for deception, for performance, for any sign that this was simply another layer of the fiction they had built. She found only raw, desperate honesty. I heard you say those words, she said, her voice breaking. And it confirmed every fear I have carried since your mother first approached me. That I am not good enough. That I am merely convenient. That someone like you could never truly love someone like me. Then let me spend the rest of my life proving those fears wrong. He pressed his forehead to hers. Do not leave, Cassia. Do not take away my chance to show you what you mean to me. What you have always meant to me. I do not know if I can trust this. Then let me earn your trust again, however long it takes, whatever it requires. His thumbs brushed away her tears. Just do not leave. Please. The pleas undid her. Theron Aldridge did not beg, did not plead. He commanded and directed and expected obedience. For him to ask, to actually ask, meant more than all his declarations combined. I am terrified, she admitted. So am I. I am terrified of losing you, of having found something this precious only to destroy it through someone else's poison. His voice roughened. Phineas wanted exactly this. He wanted to drive a wedge between us, to make you doubt me, to destroy our marriage so he could claim what he believes is rightfully his. Do not let him win, Cassia. Do not give him that power over us. She closed her eyes, feeling his warmth, his solidity, his desperate grip on her face. And she made a choice. I will stay, she whispered. But you must promise me something. Anything. Promise me that when doubts arise, when fears surface, we will speak to each other directly. No assumptions, no conclusions drawn from overheard fragments. We address things together. I promise. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I promise, Cassia. Always together. Never apart. She collapsed against him, exhaustion and relief flooding through her in equal measure. His arms wrapped around her, holding her tight. And for long minutes they simply stood there. Two people who had nearly lost everything finding their way back. I love you, she said finally, the words muffled against his chest. I know. She felt him smile against her hair. I love you too, more than I have words to express. The weeks following the crisis became a period of rebuilding and revelation. Theron made good on his promise to earn her trust, demonstrating his devotion in ways both grand and subtle. He arranged for Phineas to be cut off entirely from family social circles, ensuring that the man who had nearly destroyed their marriage suffered consequences for his malice. He introduced Cassia to his solicitors, giving her full access to financial records and legal documents, proving that she was his partner in every sense. But it was the small gestures that mattered most. He began leaving her notes, short messages tucked under her pillow or beside her breakfast plate. Simple declarations. Thinking of you. Tonight cannot come soon enough. You make every day brighter. They were so unlike his usual reserve that Cassia treasured each one, pressing them into a book she kept by her bedside. He attended every physician's visit, holding her hand while Dr. Hartley examined her, asking detailed questions about her health and the baby's development. When she suffered from morning sickness, he held her hair and brought her water and refused to leave her side, despite her protests that she was perfectly capable of being ill without assistance. You are carrying our child, he said simply. There is nowhere else I would rather be. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. By the 4th month, she had begun to show, a gentle swell beneath her gowns that Theron found endlessly fascinating. He would rest his hand there while they read together in the library, feeling for movement, his expression soft with wonder whenever the baby stirred. I cannot quite believe this is real, he admitted one evening, that in a few months we will have a child, an actual small person we are responsible for raising. Terrifying, is it not? Terrifying. And wonderful. He pressed a kiss to her temple. I never imagined wanting this, never imagined being capable of it. My father was distant, cold, more concerned with duty than affection. I assumed I would be the same. You will be nothing like that. How can you be certain? Because you care. She turned to face him. Because you notice when I am tired, or anxious, or sad. Because you have spent months proving that you are capable of tenderness, even when it does not come naturally. That man will be an excellent father." His expression revealed vulnerability mingled with determination. "I want to do this properly. Not the arrangement we originally agreed to. I want a real marriage, publicly acknowledged, with vows we actually mean. We already exchanged vows. We exchanged contractual agreements dressed in ceremonial language. I want to stand before you and promise forever, knowing that I mean it. I want there to be no question, for either of us, that this is permanent. Are you proposing to me? We are already married. Then I am proposing that we renew our commitment, properly this time." He took her hands in his. "Marry me again, Cassia. Not because we have to, but because we want to. Because we choose each other freely, without manipulation or obligation, or any reason except love." Tears pricked at her eyes. "Yes. Of course, yes." They held the ceremony in the West Haven House Chapel, the same space where they had first exchanged vows 4 months earlier. But everything else was different. This time, Cassia walked toward Theron without fear or reservation. She saw his face, open and unguarded, tears actually glistening in his eyes as she approached. He had never looked more beautiful. This time, when they spoke their vows, the words resonated with truth. "I take you as my wife," Theron said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Not because circumstance demanded it, but because life without you is no life at all. I promise to cherish you, to challenge you, to be honest with you even when honesty is difficult. I promise to be a partner in all things, to raise our children with love and integrity, and to spend every day proving that you were right to trust me with your heart." Cassia had to pause before she could respond, her throat tight with feeling. "I take you as my husband," she finally managed. "Not as salvation from difficulty, but as the person who makes every difficulty worthwhile. I promise to be honest with you, to communicate openly, to never again flee from fear without first seeking understanding. I promise to build a family with you, to laugh with you and argue with you, and grow old with you. I promise to love you, completely and without reservation, for all the days of my life." When they kissed, it was with the full weight of everything they had overcome. The congregation was small, only family and trusted friends, but the applause felt enormous. Lucretia, naturally, was insufferably pleased with herself. "I told you from the beginning that you were perfect for each other," she declared at the celebration afterward. "Though I admit the journey was rather more dramatic than I anticipated. Mother, you manipulated both of us into a false engagement and nearly destroyed everything through your meddling. Details." She waved a hand dismissively. "The outcome is what matters. You are happy, Cassia is happy, and I am about to become a grandmother. Everything proceeded exactly as it should have. That is a deeply revisionist interpretation of events. I prefer to call it optimistic perspective." She kissed Theron's cheek, then Cassia's. "Now stop complaining and go enjoy your wedding celebration. You have earned it." That night, in their shared bedchamber, now truly shared rather than adjacent, Cassia lay in Theron's arms and reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them here. "I was so certain this would end in disaster," she admitted. "From the very first moment your mother approached me, I expected everything to collapse. And instead? Instead, I found everything I never knew I wanted." She tilted her head to look at him. "How strange that the best thing in my life began with manipulation and deception. Perhaps the best things sometimes require unconventional beginnings." He tightened his arms around her. "I would not change any of it. The frustration, the fear, even the crisis with Phineas, all of it brought us here. Even when you thought I was merely convenient. I never actually thought that." He kissed her hair. From the moment you stood in my library and refused to be intimidated, I knew you were extraordinary. I simply fought very hard against acknowledging it. Stubborn man. You knew that when you married me. Both times. She laughed, the sound filling the room with warmth. Outside, London continued its endless motion. But here, in this moment, there was only the two of them and the future they were building together. A future that, despite everything, felt wonderfully certain. 4 years later, the nursery at Westhaven House echoed with joyful chaos. Cassia stood in the doorway, watching her husband attempt to negotiate with their 3-year-old son, Edmund, while simultaneously preventing their 18-month-old daughter, Rosalind, from eating the wooden blocks that were supposed to be teaching her shapes. Edmund, we do not throw blocks at our sister's head, even when she takes our toys, Theron was saying with remarkable patience. And Rosalind, blocks are for building, not for eating. We have discussed this. Rosalind responded by shoving another block toward her mouth with evident determination. Edmund took advantage of his father's divided attention to reach for another projectile. Need assistance? Cassia asked, unable to suppress her smile. Theron looked up, his hair disheveled, his cravat missing entirely, his expression somewhere between exasperation and adoration. Your children are absolute terrors. They are only my children when they misbehave. When they are angels, they are yours. They are never angels. True. She entered the room, scooped up Rosalind before another block could meet its fate, and handed a substitute toy to Edmund that seemed to satisfy his need for throwing things. Though I seem to recall someone claiming he would be a terrible father. I claimed no such thing. I said I feared being like my own father. And look at you now, covered in block dust, negotiating with toddlers, completely besotted with your offspring. I am a duke. I am not besotted. You read Edmund 3 bedtime stories last night because he asked prettily. That is called excellent parenting, not besottedness. Cassia laughed, crossing to press a kiss to his cheek. Whatever you call it, I love watching you with them. I love what we have built together. Theron's expression grew tender. He shifted Rosalind in his arms to free a hand, reaching out to touch Cassia's face with familiar gentleness. As do I. Though I confess I never imagined this life when my mother first presented her scheme. None of us did. She leaned into his touch. And yet, here we are. Much had changed in 4 years. Cassia's family had flourished under the financial security Theron's generosity provided. Her father had stopped gambling, finding purpose instead in managing the restored family estate. Her mother's health had improved dramatically once the burden of constant worry lifted. Tanith had made a brilliant debut, ultimately marrying a viscount who adored her genuinely and completely. Phineas Aldridge had been systematically excluded from society, his reputation destroyed by whispered accounts of his malicious behavior. The last Cassia heard, he had retreated to a remote country estate, bitter and alone, his scheming having cost him everything he valued. Lucretia remained formidable, meddlesome, and completely devoted to her grandchildren. She spoiled them shamelessly, taught them things Theron considered entirely inappropriate for their ages, and took obvious satisfaction in being proven right about everything. I selected Cassia from the beginning, she liked to remind anyone who would listen. I saw the potential when no one else did. You saw a desperate woman you could manipulate, Theron would respond. Details. The outcome is what matters. The marriage, forged in deception and tested by crisis, had become the solid foundation of their lives. Cassia and Theron had built something genuine from unlikely beginnings, a partnership based on honesty, communication, and the kind of love that deepened rather than diminished with time. On the evening of their 4th anniversary, they sat together in the library that had witnessed so much of their journey. The children were finally asleep, the house quiet, firelight casting dancing shadows across walls, lined with books they had both read and discussed endlessly. "Do you know what I was thinking today?" Cassia asked, setting aside her volume of philosophy. "Tell me." "I was thinking about the Winterbourne ball, where your mother found me hiding behind roses, terrified of being noticed. And now you are one of the most celebrated hostesses in London. An irony I never anticipated." She turned to face him. "I was thinking about how frightened I was, how certain that accepting your mother's proposition would lead to disaster. It nearly did. But it did not. Instead, it led to this." She gestured at the room around them, the home they shared, the life they had built. "To you, to Edmund and Rosalind, to a future I never dared imagine." Theron set aside his own book and pulled her closer, settling her against his side. "I think about it too, how close we came to losing everything because of overheard words and assumptions. We learned from it. We did. Though I confess I still want to throttle Phineas every time I think about what he tried to do. He destroyed himself. That is punishment enough. It is not enough, but I suppose it must do." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire crackle and pop. Outside, London hummed with its eternal energy, but here was only peace. "I love you," Cassia said finally. "Have I mentioned that recently?" "Not in the last hour. I was beginning to worry." She swatted his arm, but she was smiling. "I love you desperately, inconveniently, completely. Those are my words. I stole them because they are perfect." She tilted her head up to look at him. "Thank you, Theron. For what?" "For agreeing to your mother's scheme despite your resistance, for letting me into your life, for fighting for us when I was ready to flee, for being a better man than you believed yourself capable of being." She touched his face. "For giving me everything I never knew I needed." He turned his head to press a kiss to her palm. "You give me far too much credit. I spent the first months of our acquaintance being stubborn and difficult. You were also honest and loyal and unexpectedly tender. The stubbornness I could work with. How reassuring." They fell into laughter, the easy humor of two people who knew each other completely and loved each other anyway. When the laughter faded, Theron pulled her closer still, wrapping his arms around her with the familiar security she had come to treasure. "I would not change any of it," he said quietly. "The manipulation, the deception, the fear, the crisis, all of it brought us here, to this life, this family, this love, and this is exactly where I want to be." Cassia closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of him, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. She thought about the woman she had been 4 years ago, hiding behind roses, afraid of being seen. That woman seemed like a stranger now. "Do you know what Edmund asked me this morning?" she said. "I am almost afraid to hear. He asked why we love each other so much. What did you tell him?" "I told him that sometimes the best things happen when we least expect them, that his father and I found each other through circumstances that seemed impossible, and we chose to turn impossibility into something wonderful." That is a rather sophisticated answer for a 3-year-old. He seemed satisfied. Then he asked for more breakfast. Theron laughed again, the sound warming her heart. "Our son has his priorities straight. He gets that from you." They remained there as the fire burned low, two people who had found each other through manipulation and discovered love through honesty. Their story had begun with a lie whispered at a ball and 5 words overheard through a door. It had become a truth worth fighting for. And Cassia knew, with absolute certainty, that she would not change a single ridiculous, improbable, wonderful moment of it. Thank you for listening until the very end of this journey. If this story made you laugh, cry, or believe in love all over again, please show your support by liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing it with fellow lovers of romantic tales. Your support means the world and keeps our storytelling corner alive. Stay tuned. Another emotional story awaits you. Click, listen, and let your heart be swept away once more. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for being here.